टॉक 100.3 आप सुन रहे हैं विवेक और म्यूरियल आपके साथ एंड यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ वोलोंगोंग दुबई से हमारे साथ प्रोफेसर जुड़ेंगे प्रोफेसर जया डीन ऑफ फैकल्टी ऑफ बिजनेस एट UOWD एंड वाइस प्रेसिडेंट वाटर फॉर पीपल इंडिया ट्रस्ट एंड ऑल्सो हमारे साथ डॉक्टर हाजिम गौड़ा भी होंगे एसोसिएट प्रोफेसर इंजीनियरिंग एंड इंफॉर्मेशन साइंसेज फ्रॉम UOWD। नाउ कल जो है वर्ल्ड वाटर डे है। नाउ
Thanks for shutting me up. But, tomorrow is World Water Day, and we will be talking in conjunction to this as to, we would be focusing on sanitation. We'll also be talking a bit about COP28 as well. It's time that we welcome both our professors to the studio. Welcome, Dr. Hazem, and welcome, Dr. and Professor Jaya as well.
Good morning and welcome to Talk 100.3. So we would discuss a lot about, sustainable water management as well. And we would like to know from Dr. Hazem, is sustainable water management gaining momentum in the lead up to COP28? And globally, there are, significant changes that are happening. If you could tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I think it's good morning to all of you. Just to make sure that we understand what is the relation of water to the sustainability and how sustainable water is actually one of the main things which we're looking at. At the moment, we have two types of water. One is the conventional water, which is the water which we have from surface water, rainwater, and the groundwater as well. And we have the non-conventional water, which is the water is coming from wastewater treatment, where we reuse this water, or water coming from agriculture drainage, where we need to, just to treat it and use it, and desalination as well, desalinated water. This is non-conventional water, so the world started to look at these sources of water. At the moment, which in the sustainable water management actually is gaining, is actually taking action fast, and we are all the global community is looking at this because of the climate change and the impact of climate change in the water resources which we have at the moment.
In fact, talking about that, on the way, did you catch some rain right now? Because it was drizzling, I heard.
It was actually, and I was looking at the screen, It was really, I was thinking, are we going to have some rain again in here? And this is the kind of change which we have in the climate. I mean, I've been here for a few years now, and I can see that there is some changes in that sense. So we need to, to think about water in a sustainable way. So in the sustainability and sustainable development goals, we got one goal, which is in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is talking about water and sanitation for all. So,
but as long as the weather is pleasant, should we complain about climate change? If the weather is great, we're enjoying, it's pleasant, it's all great.
Yes.
The moment it becomes unbearable is where we start questioning, right?
That's absolutely one way to think about it. But I mean, if we don't have water, you cannot really enjoy the good weather.
Right.
So having a good weather without water is actually you cannot enjoy it much. So we are looking at different types and different ways to increase our resources of water. So is the sustainable sustainable water management is gaining momentum in the goals for SDGs at the moment? Yes, it is. But is it enough? This is the question.
Right. Right now, Professor Jay, I'm going to put a glance onto you and your subject. Now, given your experience as Vice President, Water for People India Trust, this gives us a more practical understanding about the key problems in groundwater management. Your take on this?
Thank you. That's an important question because there is substantial data on the looming climate crisis, and there is a lot of knowledge out there as to what the challenges are. I think what I would really like to emphasize here is that while the problems are global, the solutions have to be local.
Okay.
We have to come up with a contextual understanding of the problem. We spend a lot of time on infrastructure development such as water pipes and water points, but if we are not able to protect the water source, then we are essentially not solving the problem. So the question is, how do we focus on the what as well as the how? They are related, of course.
Okay.
Right? So it is important to move a little bit away from the technical side of things, because there is a lot of information available, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of investment in the technical side of things, but it is important to take a human-centered approach to then come up with a meaningful solution on the ground, right? So let me explain a little bit. Now, when we look at the sources of water, fresh water, it's rainfall, which gets collected on the ground, in dams, in reservoirs, in rivers, and then it gets collected in aquifers under the ground, right? And aquifers is a common source pool, right? Which essentially means about 60 to 70 to 80% of that water, of groundwater, is being distributed for used for agriculture, about 10 to 15% say for industry, and about 10% for human consumption. Now, since that water is under the ground, the first challenge becomes how do we then distribute that water in equitable ways, because it's also a zero-sum game, right? Because there is a limited pool of resource. Climate change compounds this issue because you were talking about rainfall. If we are not able to predict the rainfall, then it becomes all the more difficult for us to manage and predict for managing the water resource, right? So the question then becomes, and there are other challenges. For example, water source management, which is to do with how do we protect, for example, the hand pumps and the bore pumps and the dug wells from contamination of water and from the physical damage. There is a third problem, which is water security. Now, since there is again a lot of data which says that our aquifers is drying up because of a lot of use for irrigation, for example. And if we are moving away from infrastructure, again, the problem with infrastructure is that it is expensive. We can construct the infrastructure, but it is expensive, right? And also we lose water to evaporation. So, which essentially means groundwater in some ways is a natural source of water, but then it is not always easy for us to identify those groundwater reserves, which makes us, I think it becomes so much more imperative to understand that groundwater management, there are multiple stakeholders. At the end of the day, we have to distribute the water in equitable ways and sustainable ways, but the difficulty of climate change makes it impossible to predict, a whole lot of issues that I just talked about.
Right.
The third issue is, again, when we talk about climate change and rainfall, we have to get rainfall at the right time, in the right place. You asked the question whether, rainfall...
till the time it's pleasant.
Right?
Yeah.
But imagine if during harvest time rain comes. You're essentially destroying livelihoods, right?
Correct.
And we have seen that. In fact, lack of water leads to drought. Excessive rainfall leads to cyclones. All of which also has a socio-demographic, impact. Which means a whole mass of people are then moving away, leaving their agriculture. And if we are moving away from infrastructure, as I said, and to service provision on the ground, the other challenge is, do you have enough human manpower on the ground in order to distribute those services in sustainable ways? So clearly, it is a holistic problem. It has to be understood in a contextually relevant manner. We have to understand in situ and manage the problem in situ.
Right, we'll have to slip into a quick little break, but when we come back, we will be talking about water management at length. You stick around to Talk 100.3.
This is Talk 100.3.
And yes, हम बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ वोलोंगोंग के प्रोफेसर्स हमारे साथ, प्रोफेसर जया and also Dr Hazem with us. We're talking about water management.
Yeah, we're talking about water management, and before we could go on, on the break, Professor Jaya gave us a complete rundown and understanding about the key problems. Right now, let's talk about steps to move forward to ensure that we are moving towards a sustainable future as well, where water management at the ground level is concerned. Professor Jaya.
So, just to continue on what I was saying, overall, we have to look at water management holistically and in a contextually relevant manner. We cannot have compartmentalized solutions to water management, because that is certainly not sustainable. So when we look at water, we said that it is a groundwater, particularly it is a common pool resource with multiple uses, and one of the primary requirements is to ensure that we are distributing it equitably and sustainably. But if we are moving away from infrastructure to service on the ground, because when water becomes a utility, then how do you distribute water on the ground in equitable ways? Do you have sufficient manpower? So the first question is, one of the principles of groundwater management is to ensure that there are enough service providers on the ground who have got the training, but more importantly, are we providing them with the dignity of labor, which motivates them? Are we incentivizing these services? Are we measuring these services? For example, we could have market-based approaches, and Water for People, for example, we do provide some capital investment for people to start opening small shops where you then provide, water and sanitation services. But without investment or without continued support coming from institutions, these kind of efforts are not sustainable. So another issue that we need to look at, or another way to move forward, is when water budget is distributed from the center to the state to the local governing bodies, there have to be accountability set as to how the water demand is being managed, how the water is being distributed, right? So the related issue I would think is when we look at the communities on the ground, this is related to SDG 6, right? Water and sanitation services. But SDG 6 is also related to SDG 5, gender parity, which is related to SDG 4, education, inclusive education, right? And I'll give you a quick example. We can probably, I think it is well known that the lack of access to water and sanitation facilities impact women disproportionately, right? There's a lot of data on the ground that the women, the moment they hit puberty, 14, 15, without lack of access to sanitation and water, they have to get out of schools. They are the ones who have to travel long distances to get the water, right? Now, if those women are not therefore part of those water user committees on the ground, if they are not part of the policy building, then you're essentially taking out a very important voice. So that inclusivity is also extremely important when we are looking at any kind of solutions to emerge from the ground. Overall, I think it is important for us to understand that you have to invest in capacity building on the ground in an inclusive manner, but you also have to have public and private sector incentives or institutional building processes, institutional governance mechanisms, and essentially come up with a solution which is holistic through multi-stakeholder engagement in a contextually relevant manner.
And really interesting, also what you mentioned, Professor Jaya, that, problem globally hai, but then solution has to be done locally.
Correct.
Let's move on to Dr. Hazem. How has UAE set benchmarks in integrated water resources management, and how can other emerging economies, get some inspiration about this?
This is very interesting, actually, because in UAE here, they have taken lots of actions. And one of the last actions, or one of the most important ones, that they have developed the Integrated Water Resources Management Plan. This is which was launched by His Highness, Sheikh Hamdan bin Zayed Al Nahyan. And this plan was really comprehensive. They've done some studies. They actually got all the pool of resources from all the experts all over the world, and they started to put this vision for them. So actually when they did it, they were thinking about, they were passionate about the working towards a clear strategic and automated plans, and they wanted to, just to get the best out of this plan. So the challenges here in UAE was there's no resources of water. There's a scarce of water. The depletion of the groundwater levels as well. It's a problem.
Right.
So they needed to think about ways to improve the water use. One of the things which they start to think about how they can utilize the resources, which is they have water resources in a most sustainable way. This is by educating people, spending money on innovations, reducing the water they use for agriculture. As we all know, agriculture usually uses a lot of water, and this is the main, our most of our water goes into agriculture use. So they started to invest in, irrigation by sprinkler and other sources, dripping irrigation, and the food security. One aspect which people maybe don't think about too much is that without water, the economy is not going to go well. Investment in order. This was one of the interesting thing in their plan. They thought about water as something which can make a development for the country, because they said that without this water we cannot really get investors. They cannot come to invest in the industry if they don't have water to
this is a very different angle.
It is.
I mean, none of us ever thought of this, right?
Exactly.
Investment and
investment, yes. To attract investors, investor has to make sure that they have enough water for the industry. They have enough water for the people who are coming to live here, for making sure that there is some food security. And if you have noticed, and during the pandemic in the UAE, it was amazing that we didn't have any issues with food.
Right,
Absolutely.
right. We did.
Absolutely. And they started, in the, I think 2 years ago, they announced that they are investing on the greenhouses for food, actually.
Right.
The vertical
Right.
farmings
Vertical
that are
farming,
happening.
Exactly,
correct.
the vertical farming and so on. And this part of the plan, that how to make the country safe for water scarcity, as well as food security. So we have food security, water scarcity, and water security.
Wow.
And this is amazing. The plan they have put here, the vision they had, is absolutely one of the best. And this is what I can say, that they can set a target for the other countries to follow.
Correct.
So if they look at the integrated wastewater management plan for UAE, they can definitely learn a lot from it.
Right. And Dr. Hazem, when we're talking about goals of sustainable water management, you cannot let leave the generation next aside. So what is it that the generation next would need to do to be in alignment with the future as well, where sustainable water management is concerned? And how can academics help?
Exactly. This is a very good question, actually. What we are doing at the University of Wollongong, that we are trying to educate our students, to be more sustainable. We have, in the civil engineering department, we teach them, we give them a course on hydrology and hydraulics, and they understand what the water cycle and how they manage the water in a most sustainable way. So sustainability is part of our, education system and courses. This is number one. Number two, we are doing some research with our students in how to manage water properly, using the latest technology, using the environmental, models, so we can assess the options which we are using to manage our water. Are they environmentally sustainable or not?
Right.
And this is really important. People think usually about how much money we invest on this. It's not about money investment. It's about money is good, yeah, we have to look at it, but in the same way, can we find another sustainable way to do it, which has less environmental impact on the environment? So, because anything we do, any action we take to manage water, because of our man-made, structures and so on, it will have environmental impact. So we teach them about life cycle assessment, we actually teach them as well about life cycle costing, and our MSc students doing projects in that sense. Another thing which we do, we think about, how can we manage water? You said that, when I was coming, it was drizzling a little bit.
Can I just put a
and the
bucket
rain,
and save?
exactly. So what we are doing at the moment, we're working in some projects, that how can we manage the water on the streets. And when some areas, it's common actually that sometimes you find water on the streets. This is because maybe the gully bots are not cleaned, where the water is collected and goes into the drainage. So we actually developed the system where we can give an alarm to the local authority, say municipalities, so they will know that there is some issues in this area, and they have to look at the drainage systems and how to clean it. So there is some.
Nice.
Oh,
yes.
very
We can
nice.
utilize that
Exactly.
as well,
Very
not
nice,
let it
yeah.
go waste.
Absolutely. And this was one of the projects which our undergraduate students did last year with Professor Hiley and myself, and they developed a prototype which was amazing. So when the water flooded, the system just send a message to the authority or to the person via the SMS message, which can actually warn. It's a warning system, warning message which says that yes, we have a problem here and we need to sort out this problem.
Amazing. We're running out of time, Dr. Hazem. Quickly, Professor Jaya, if you could point out the what UOWD is ensuring that graduates have greater awareness, understanding, responsibility towards achieving SDG priorities related to water management.
As Dr. Hazem mentioned, it's a lot about changing attitudes. Once we have the awareness and the knowledge, the young people are more willing to become part of the change that is happening at the societal levels, at the organizational level. So we are very conscious that everything that we teach is currently aligned with SDG priorities. As I shared earlier, all the SDG priorities are related to each other. They are not. They cannot be looked at in a discrete fashion. So most recently, I think a couple of years ago, we were the only private institution that got almost a 7 million grant to study food security. Dr. Yunus and Dr. Balan, so currently there is a big research group that is already trying to understand the various issues related to food security. We have research clusters which is specifically focused on sustainability. So we are trying to embed, I think a lot of what gets measured gets done. So we are trying to ensure that a lot of our research, a lot of our teaching and learning content is aligned with SDG priorities, so that it is almost a natural process of learning for the students as to why we must move away from looking at business just as increasing shareholder value to managing stakeholder interests, to creating value to the society. So there is a lot of emphasis both with regard to research and teaching and learning as to what are the societal impact of all that you're learning.
Okay, what an insightful conversation this has turned out to be.
We're running out of time, but we would love to have you again, probably next week if it is possible. But Professor Jaya and Dr. Hazem, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.